Despite helping get this segment off the ground in the early 2000s, Infiniti, surprisingly, isn't a big-name player in the luxury compact crossover market for 2022. We featured a lot of vehicles in this price range, such as the BMW X3, Audi Q5, and Cadillac XT5, to name a few. But today, I want to take a deep dive into the 2022 Infiniti QX50. Last year I filmed the QX55, which I was really impressed with when it comes to its design, but also the interior comfort as well. Now, Infiniti is one of the only brands that does use a CVT in this segment, which could be a bit of a hindrance to its growth here in the US. But I want to see how it compares to its closest rivals, and also see if you are looking at buying a crossover in 2022 and you want to buy a luxury vehicle that is comfortable to drive, has a nice soft suspension, and also is pretty practical, then maybe the QX50 might be a great option if you are looking at buying a vehicle in the price range between $40,000 and $60,000. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Infiniti of Norwood in Norwood, Massachusetts, for allowing me to do this review. The link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Infiniti inventory. I also want to give a huge shout and thank you to Adam, who's the general manager of Infiniti of Norwood, for letting me take this vehicle out for the day to fully experience it. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. Infiniti, like many of its closest competitors these days, are known for their lineup of crossovers, rather than the performance-inspiring Q50 and Q60. And with most of their consumers choosing vehicles like the QX50 and QX60, that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. With us for just over 4 years now for the current generation, Infiniti's smallest and most affordable SUV finds itself among a list of rivals, such as the Acura RDX, Lexus NX, and Audi Q5, to name a few. But the question still remains as to whether this crossover still has what it takes to not only be relevant in this market, but to also compete with new arrivals and perennial standouts. Starting off with pricing, the QX50 Autograph comes in at just under $57,000, which is the top end of the range for this crossover. Beginning with the 2019 model year, Infiniti transitioned to a front-wheel drive bias platform, putting the QX50 on the map as being one of the more spacious and practical vehicles in this market. By doing so, exterior dimensions are not only on par with most competitors, but it's marginally longer than the Audi Q5 and Lexus NX, despite its traditional sportier body lines that continues on this perception that Infiniti's crossovers are aerodynamic for optimal on-road performance, which was far more apparent with the all-new QX55 that we featured last year. Very surprising is that when it comes to off-road capability, the QX50 has a ground clearance of 8.6 inches, outclassing many rivals in that regard. And if you do live in colder climates, you should have no problem taking on unplowed roads during the winter if you opt for all-wheel drive. For the road presence of the QX50, Infiniti's design team has consistently found ways to make the vehicles have striking cosmetic features, especially now in the early 2020s, but also last decade as well. Drawing your attention first is the origami-inspired grille that's outlined by chrome accents, which can be found throughout the exterior of this crossover. Better yet, the air vents you see on the lower portion of the front bumper are in fact functional, and that's something we don't often experience even for luxury crossovers, as it's usually just for decorational purposes. Noticeable from multiple angles are the sharp body lines that contribute to the dynamic look, but also the rounder front fascia does add a sportier vibe. Finishing off the front portion of the QX50 are LED headlights and fog lights, which will obviously show better in lower lighting, but more importantly, keeps this crossover looking fresh for the 2022 model year. Moving over to the side profile, the Autograph will be sitting on unique 20-inch wheels to set this trim apart from the other models. Ride quality, even with the larger tire size, was pretty sufficient, and in fact, Infiniti's compact crossover is one of the more comfortable vehicles we've driven in this segment. You'll have body color power folding side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then coming around to the back, sticking to its heritage, the QX50 has a rounder rear fascia and thin C-pillars that we've become accustomed to seeing from Infiniti for almost 2 decades. While not a sportback like we saw with the QX55, this crossover still looks sleek, and thanks to the sharp body lines that run the length of the vehicle, it has the appearance of constantly being in motion. Just like up front, LED taillights provides an upscale and modern look, while the dual exhaust outlets and brushed aluminum rear diffuser adds a hint of sportiness. Under the hood, the Infiniti QX50 is powered by a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, producing 268 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with a CVT. With competitors offering dual-clutch automatics and ZF8 speeds, the QX50 isn't going to feel as spry and athletic, even among other vehicles with a 4-cylinder engine. But that hasn't been Infiniti's MO as of late, and the driving dynamics reflect a softer and premium interior rather than being a crossover that's going to put you on the edge of your seat. It should be noted that the QX50 is one of the more powerful options in this segment, and you're looking at a 0 to 60 time of around 6.5 seconds. For fuel economy, you can expect to receive right around 23 miles per gallon in the city and 29 miles per gallon on the highway. Stepping inside, you're greeted by power-adjustable, heated, and ventilated quilted leather seats with ultra-suede inserts for both the driver and passenger. Where Infiniti has always excelled is with their interior quality, as arguably it's the cabin that's the highlight for this vehicle, as the soft-touch padding and the design of the dashboard provides a safe and secure feeling. The usage of ultra-suede and leather materials blends together nicely to give you a welcoming environment for when you're commuting or going on long road trips. In front of you, between the analog gauges, is a digital display that's commonly found in most new Nissan-related products, giving you a good amount of information. Unlike its bigger sibling, the QX60, there won't be a full digital display offered for the 2022 model, but one can only assume that at some point we'll see the same technology and interior trickle down to Infiniti's compact crossover. To make driving safer, you will have a head-up display with traffic sign recognition and a digital speedometer to help keep your eyes on the road ahead at all times. Moving over to the infotainment system, you have a dual touchscreen setup, with the top screen being home to your navigation system and camera angles, which include top and side views to help park the QX50. To the delight of most drivers, the coolest feature with this user interface is that when paired with wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, Google Maps and Waze will be showcased here, giving you the ability to multitask, as you can access vehicle settings or the radio, which can be found on the second touchscreen without having to close out of Waze or the Google Maps app. It's the second touchscreen that is your main head unit, where you can scroll through different menus. Resolution and responsiveness are on par with rivals, with little to no lagging whatsoever. And for buyers looking for a traditional layout, you'll have quick access buttons found just below the head unit, and mounted on either side of this screen will be the buttons for your dual zone climate control, AC, front and rear defrosters, and 3-level heated and ventilated seats. For the center console, you'll find a cubby for your key fob, a USB and USB-C input, and a 12-volt outlet, which can all be hidden for a sleeker appearance. Closer to the passenger side, but still within arm's reach, is a rotary dial and buttons which control your navigation system and camera angles. The drive mode selector can also be found here, where you can switch between 3 different settings, and you can personalize how the QX50 responds when it comes to steering input. For the center storage compartment, you'll have enough room for smaller items, and rounding out the front seating area, above will be a panoramic moonroof to let in some natural light to the interior. Now for passengers in the back, we're going to start off on the passenger side, and this seat is adjusted further back. It's also somewhat on a recline, and as you can tell, I look a bit cramped, but there's a few things to point out here with the QX50. So the second row of seats are on rails. You can slide them backwards to get a more adequate amount of legroom. So if you do have maybe a taller passenger up front, you can slide backwards, and that way you can be a bit more comfortable. But also, these seats recline, so now you can just relax and enjoy the driving experience. And these quilted leather seats are pretty comfortable, and really, just like up front, I think this vehicle from a comfort aspect is pretty nice and pretty premium as well. When it comes to headspace, even with this panoramic moonroof, you do have a good amount of it. And that's what's really interesting about the QX50, because it does look pretty small. It does look like a sportier crossover because it doesn't have the boxy shape. It doesn't have a boxy roofline. And yet, here I am, and I'm not really complaining at all. I think you could have people around maybe 5'9", 5'10" sit back here, and they should be pretty fine. Now, moving on to the center seat, you do have a center hump, but it's not too aggressive. There are some decent placements for your feet. But I think, like a lot of compact crossovers in this segment, it is going to be a bit cramped to try fitting a third person back here. Now, I do think that on shorter drives, it could certainly be done, especially if you have maybe smaller kids or maybe average-sized adults. I think it could certainly work there. But on longer drives, that's just not going to be possible. I would definitely look at the QX60 if you do have a bigger family. And then moving on to the driver's side, I adjusted the seat to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have plenty of legroom to work with here. And of course, I'm not the tallest person out there, but just to put everything into perspective, if you are a smaller passenger or a smaller driver, I think you're going to have enough room where everyone in this vehicle will be nice and comfortable. But I can just sit back, relax, and recline, and the soft touch padding also makes its way for the second row area. So really great to see. Also, for both windows, you do have rear sunshades, so that way you can have a bit more privacy. And also, if it is a bit sunny, you don't need to have that glaring down on you. Also back here, you will have two rear air vents to go along with climate control, T-level heated outboard seats, a USB-C and USB input. And rounding out the rear seating area, you do get a center armrest with two cup holders. Now, coming around to the back, you're going to receive a power liftgate. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 31.4 cubic feet of room to work with, which is actually one of the more practical options in this market, outclassing the Audi Q5, Mercedes-Benz GLC, and the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, to name a few. I was able to fit all my camera gear back here and then some. If I wanted to go grocery shopping after, I'd be able to do all my shopping and have no issues when it comes to practicality. If you are going on a road trip with the family, I think you can easily fit 5 to 6 bags of luggage back here, no problem at all. Then with the second row seats folded, you're looking at right around 65 cubic feet of room. So it will be on par with the Volvo XC60 and also the BMW X3, which I think is pretty impressive for a vehicle that from the exterior looks somewhat more compact. It looks like it has a lower roofline, and yet that doesn't take away from how much room you actually have back here, whether it is the cargo area or the second row seats. Then on either side of the rear cargo area, you'll have quick release tabs to conveniently lower the second row seats. So that way you're spending more time loading this vehicle up with whatever you're carrying for that particular day, rather than manually lowering those seats yourself. Then beneath the floor mat, you'll have additional storage compartments for some smaller items, such as car detail equipment, water bottles, or maybe even valuable items that you don't want people to peek in and steal what you have. So there might be times where you leave this vehicle unattended. Maybe you're at a mall, or this time of year you could be skiing and snowboarding, and you have electronics with you that you maybe want to keep safe and secure. You can leave those items back here. And then once you're done, just press the button and the liftgate will close automatically. So we are now behind the wheel of the 2022 Infiniti QX50. And since we've already gone over the interior layout, the second row seating area, and cargo space, let's see how this vehicle performs, how it handles, how it drives, and how it compares to other luxury compact crossovers in this segment. Now, the QX50 is, I believe, the only crossover in this particular market that is using a CVT. So all the other brands out there are using traditional automatics. Specifically for the Japanese brands, they're using like a 10-speed automatic in the Acura RDX. And then for the European brands, you have ZF 8 speeds and dual clutch automatics. And I really want to see how this CVT performs, because I had driven the QX55 last year, and the CVT did mimic the gear shifts quite well. What I have noticed, though, is that especially when this vehicle is cold, that's when the CVT drones quite a bit. The gear shifts just aren't there, and it really takes some time for it to warm up, and then it starts performing a lot better and smoother. And that's one thing that was a bit of a concern when I first got the keys to this crossover. I'm like, is it really going to be that loud while I'm driving on this test drive? But thankfully, so far, it is quiet. And I gotta be honest here, I've driven a lot of luxury crossovers in this segment, and the QX50 really stands out in a few ways. One being is the fact that the interior is extremely comfortable. I love the leather seats. They're quilted. They've got a good amount of bolstering. For a crossover that's not performance oriented, the bolstering is really nice. It keeps you in place. It hugs you really well. And then also, just the materials that they use, the ultra suede with the leather, it really is nice in here. It's nice and comfortable, and also, I think it's really premium when it comes to the soft touch materials. So right here is really where you hear that CVT, but it's not annoying here. So I can drive, I can enjoy the driving experience, and I'm not going to be complaining about that droning. But I will say this, though. When you look at where Infiniti is going with the QX60, and really Nissan in general, where now they have the Pathfinder and the 400Z, they're becoming a bit more exciting. They're becoming a bit more unpredictable. And really, over the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, they haven't really been the manufacturers you're going to look towards and say, I want that vehicle. But now with the QX60, you can start seeing that there's a lot of hope here. There's a lot of opportunity. And I'm really excited for what is to come in the future. Now, I would say that the QX50 is a relic of the past. It's a relic of what Nissan used to be, where the QX60 is where we're going in the future. When it comes to handling and body roll, you're going to feel the body roll, of course. You do have a decent amount of ground clearance for this crossover, but I love the weighted steering. It feels very smooth. Everything about this crossover is surprisingly smooth, and that is what's so perplexing about this vehicle. And why did Infiniti go with the CVT? Because they should have dropped in a true automatic. And I honestly believe, when you look at the price point, when you're looking at around under $40,000 to start, and then even for around $57,000 on the high end, if you just gave us a true automatic, I think this crossover could really give a lot of the competitors a run for their money, simply because the softness of suspension, I think, could rival the Volvo XC60. Now, that is really high praise, because the Volvo XC60 is one of the more softer vehicles in this segment. But I feel the same way with the QX50. It's really comfortable to drive. It's not harsh on the roads. It goes over the bumps quite well. Then when it comes to the driving dynamics, the steering is pretty good. It's not loose at all. It does provide some feedback here and there. And really, I just think that in this particular setting, it's a great daily driver. It's the CVT that I think is holding this crossover back. Now, I don't know what Infiniti has in store and what they have planned in the upcoming few years for this vehicle, but drop in a 9-speed automatic that we're seeing in the QX60, and now you have a vehicle that I think is going to become very appealing for a lot of buyers, especially for people who are looking to save some money. I also would like to see this vehicle get much needed technology that we're seeing in the QX60 and even the Nissan Rogue. We are going to have a full digital gauge cluster, and I love the new infotainment system that's now found in the QX60. I just think that that'd be very beneficial for this vehicle moving forward. But in the meantime, because I'm driving a 2022 model year, I do love the dual touchscreen setup. Even though a lot of people are going to say, oh, it is a bit outdated, I love the fact that you have the navigation map up, and also I can access the radio, I can access other settings at the same time. And I noticed that with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well, where that screen stays up there. So I can have Waze, I can have Google Maps, but at the same time, I can then access the music, I can maybe change drive modes. It's just, I think it's a lot more intuitive. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the infotainment system or maybe even the lack of a full digital gauge cluster. I think a lot of people, even today in 2022, still want to have the analog gauges. They're not going to complain about that. I think when you compare it to Audi, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, that's where obviously the QX50 is going to be falling behind its closest rivals. But I just think that when it comes to the intangibles, when it comes to what this crossover is offering outside of performance and outside of driving dynamics, I look at this crossover and I'm like, there's a lot of potential here. It's just me missing two key ingredients. And of course, it is that traditional automatic and it's the technology, because the amount of rear legroom that you have back there, the space that you have, and also the cargo area, this is very competitive with a lot of vehicles in this market. And I just think that there's a lot to like about this crossover. And that's why I think it does score high numbers when you look at Motor Trend, Car and Driver, and other automotive publications. They give it a decent score, but it's always coming back to the transmission and the performance. And really, when you look at the performance numbers, 268 horsepower, 280 pound-feet of torque, that is one of the more powerful options in this market. So there's a lot going for this crossover. I just think that there needs to be some minor tweaks, some minor updates. So let's get on the highway here. I'm gonna put it into sport mode. It does get up to speed pretty quickly, and you're looking at a 0 to 60 time of around 6.5 seconds. And quite honestly, you feel the torque when you are accelerating, so you can get on the highway safely. You can pass slower drivers. There's that power there. And then the CVT, it does mimic the gear shifts. I think it does hold on to the gears a little too long, but that's no different than a lot of non-performance luxury and non-luxury crossovers. I've talked about this a lot on the channel, where sport modes just aren't that engaging, and I think for the Infiniti QX50, it's not much different in that regard. Now, when it comes to the driving environment that you find yourself in behind the QX50 and also the safety aspects, when it comes to front vision, you have plenty of it. Nice panoramic view in front of you. A-pillars are somewhat aggressive, but they don't really create a blind spot. Then when it comes to the side mirrors, they're pretty big. You can see everything in your blind spots there, and your blind spot detection is on the A-pillar itself, so it will illuminate if something is in your blind spots. Then looking out back, of course, with the QX50 being a bit more of a sportier looking crossover, you're not going to have as much vision that you're going to see in boxier crossovers, and the headrest will take away some of that rear vision, but overall I can see everything around me. But what's really more impressive is how much shoulder room I have here with the QX50, because for a compact crossover, you are going to notice that some vehicles are a bit more claustrophobic. It's a bit more tighter for the interior, but there's plenty of it up front, and it just makes you feel as though you're in a bigger crossover than in reality. So what is my final verdict for the 2022 Infiniti QX50 when it comes to the driving experience? Well, honestly, if you're not bothered by the CVT, if you don't really care about having an exhilarating driving experience, and you just want to have more of a comfortable, laid-back daily commuter, that's what the QX50 is. Now, like I said before, when it comes to the CVT, when this vehicle is a bit colder, that's when I notice the engine a little bit louder, and also the CVT isn't really shifting as quickly as it should. It's not mimicking those gear shifts. But when the vehicle starts getting warmed up, when the engine starts warming up, that's where everything starts quieting down. Even in sport mode, I'm not noticing too much of a difference. And also, I do like the steering. It's decently weighted. It's not going to be heavy like a BMW X3, but it's not going to be light like an Alfa Romeo Stelvio either. But then when it comes to the driving environment, this, in my opinion, is one of the softer and more comfortable crossovers I've driven in this segment. Would be comparable to the Volvo XC60, which I do believe is high praise. The Volvo XC60 definitely emphasizes comfort and luxury more so than other European brands that's really focused on more of a European and performance-driven driving experience. But it's actually really soft. The suspension's nice and soft, goes over the bumps really well, and the road noise is really not that annoying at all. It's actually a pretty quiet cabin. When it comes to the performance though, for 268 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, it is pretty peppy. It's not going to be agile or athletic, but it can get you up to speed in a decent manner. And then when it comes to the practicality, I love the fact that you have the amount of cargo space that you do with this crossover, because when you look at it, you're like, that's a lot, and it does outclass the Q5, the Stelvio, the GLC, very competitive with the BMW X3. And then when it comes to second row seating, I think it's pretty good, especially since the second row seats are on rails. So honestly, what you have here to work with the QX50 is a vehicle that does the intangibles really well, that gives you quite a bit, but it's just the technology and the performance that is lacking. And actually, for Infiniti, they don't need to go to the drawing board and spend hours on end trying to figure out how to make this vehicle more popular, because all they need to do is just replicate what they've done with the QX60. And I think right then and there, you now have a crossover that is going to draw in a lot of attention, get a lot of praise from journalists. And also, I think, just like with the QX60, it's going to be held in high regard the minute it hits showrooms. So I think for right now, the Infiniti QX50 is still a decent crossover if you need to buy a vehicle right now and you want something that's comfortable and something that's a bit more family friendly. But for Infiniti, if any of you executives are watching this video, watching this review, please give us a true automatic. So in closing, as I just discussed during the test drive, the Infiniti QX50 is one of the most perplexing crossovers in this market. And it's really because everything that I've experienced today, when it comes to the practicality, when it comes to the second row seating area, when it comes to these quilted leather seats with ultra suede inserts, even the softness of the suspension, and also the lack of road noise, there's so many positives that I can take away and I could look at and say, wow, this vehicle has a lot going for it. But just like all the automotive journalists that have reviewed this vehicle before me, it comes back to the CVT. Now, I understand why Infiniti did that, especially with where Nissan was 4 to 5 years ago. But now in 2022, when we're seeing what Infiniti is capable of with the QX60, with the interior layouts, with the 9-speed automatic transmission, even with the design, you know and you expect Infiniti to do the exact same with the QX50. And even today in 2022, and after driving this vehicle around, it's a nice crossover. It does handle the imperfections in the road quite well. The interior is nice and insulated and it's quiet. And even when it comes to straight line performance, you feel the torque, you feel the power. It just comes back to the CVT. This vehicle has all the right ingredients to be a successful vehicle in the US, but it's just missing two components. And that is a true traditional automatic and also up-to-date technology. Even though I do love the dual touchscreen setup, I think that it's great to have, especially where you can have the navigation system running at all times. And you can also have your radio playing. You can access other settings as well. I personally like that. I also like the fact that we have physical buttons in an era where a lot of brands are going in the direction of having everything being accessed on the head unit. Then also when it comes to the center console, I love the way it's designed. The dashboard is wrapped around you, so you do feel as though you're in a fighter jet-like cockpit. And really, though, there's just a lot of great takeaways. It just, at the end of the day, comes back to that CVT. And like I said before, hopefully people from Infiniti are watching this, or actually from Nissan are watching this, because I do think that if you drop in a true automatic into this vehicle, I don't even think you need to make a lot of changes. The QX50 then becomes a very enticing option in this particular market and price range, especially when you look at what other competitors are offering. I just think that when it comes to the performance, when it comes to the suspension, when it comes to interior quality and comfort, this vehicle can hold its own in a very highly contested segment with a lot of competitors. And really all it needs is just some minor tweaks, some minor updates to be, in my opinion, a really good crossover. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.